All right, it's finally happening, man. It's finally happening. As Penny Lane said in Almost Famous, it's finally happening. So, welcome to Sports Biz from an agent's perspective, new sports podcast, which is proudly owned by MAG, Mbekela Agency Group. And I am the proprietor of the agency group, as I am a registered football agent who's currently practicing in Japan and Singapore. So yeah, this is just something that I've been working on, something that's been in the works, as I've felt the need that, I need to bring out content and, talk sports with, my listeners. And, one of the most unique things about my sporting journey, which I'll dive into in a moment, is that I was not a soccer player, and that's what is so funny when I was actually getting interviewed to become a sports agent by the JFA, was that you played a different sport. Why are you getting into being an agent? And I told them that I'd been involved and been a rugby player for so long that by the time I came to my retirement, I just needed a change. I just needed to sort of just venture into another sport and just discover another sport in depth. So basically in this episode, this is our first episode of the podcast. I'm nervous as hell. I'm probably going to fuck up. Yeah, I'm probably going to fuck up a little bit, but it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. It's raw, it's uncut, it's unscripted. I try my best to prep by just, putting bullet points about, points that I might cover during this first episode. And yeah, man. So yeah, these podcasts, I don't plan on bringing you 2 hour long, podcasts and that type of stuff. Maybe, as time goes by, we might gradually work, towards that amount of time. But, I plan to keep them concise, and I plan to keep them, informative. And yeah, and I'm also hoping that at some point, I'll be able to, interview some prolific sporting icons that can come and have a chat with me on the podcast, and we can basically just dive into the business of professional sports, because that is what my passion is. That's why after I was an athlete, I ventured into getting into the business side, was because I wanted to stay in the industry, but I just didn't want to become a coach. But more on that as I tell you guys a little bit about me and my background and what I'm basically about. All right, so my full name is, get ready for this, is Kangelani Mbekela. I'm originally from Mthatha in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. And growing up, sports, sport in general was such a big thing in my family, And I remember the first time I went to a pro soccer game was when Mthatha had a team which was called the Bushbucks. And I remember, my dad, he had the hookup because he worked for the company that was actually sponsoring the team. So he was very, buddy with the owner of Mthatha Bucks. So basically, he would take me to the games, man. And I will never forget the moment when I walked into the stadium for the first time. I felt like I was home, and I think that's when I knew that sport is where that I'm always gonna feel at home. It's the place where nothing else mattered but what was going on between the four lines. No matter what sport it is, 4 lines of the field, 4 lines of the court, it doesn't matter. So I think that's when my love for sports started. And I think at that time I was only probably 7 or 8, man. I can't remember. But yeah, shout out to my late pops, man, Victor Lungelo Mbekela. He was the man who introduced me to sports. And the one thing I'll always appreciate about my pops and my mom as well is that they never forced, sports upon us as their kids. So I had 3 other siblings. I've only got 2 other siblings now. As one passed away, and we were never forced into sports. They encouraged it, but they never forced it. But academics was at the forefront though. Like, you couldn't do your sports if your marks sucked. That was the deal that the parents made with us. And it's just something that's always stuck with me, that as much as I enjoy sports and everything, having parents that always looked at life beyond that was kind of helpful, because it helped me also look at life beyond sports, but also appreciate the industry as well. So basically, my sporting journey, man, just a little bit about my sporting journey. So even though soccer was the first sport that I was introduced to, I'm not ashamed to say this, but I sucked. I wasn't a very good soccer player. I mean, I tried, but you just know. You just know when you're not good at something. But I participated because I was trying to make my pops happy, because soccer or football was our bond. And from there, I moved to a school that didn't actually offer soccer, and that actually worried my dad so much when I moved to that school in elementary or primary school, depending on where you're living and how you call it. So when I got there was no soccer and there was only rugby. So it literally became a point where I had to make a decision: am I going to play this rugby, or am I just going to do athletics? Because at the previous school I was doing soccer and athletics, but at this new school there was no soccer, so it was going to have to be athletics and something else. So I decided to sign on as a rugby player, and I sucked in the beginning, but because I was a new kid and I was trying to make friends, I just wanted to play a sport that would allow me to hang out with my friends. And I ended up enjoying rugby so much that I didn't realize how much I was learning about the game, and how much I was actually improving. So what started to happen was, after 2-3 years, man, I started moving up and playing higher rep teams at school. And all of a sudden, one day, I wake up and I'm quite a decent rugby player. Like, I'm never gonna lie to you guys. Look, everything that I bring will be authentic and 100% truthful. I didn't think I was the greatest rugby player, but because I had come literally from the bottom, playing C-team rugby and eventually playing A-team rugby, I learned the value of hard work, and that sort of carried with me even when I moved to another school now, which was in another province. I carried that work rate with me, and that's where things took off. And things went very well. Playing my rugby. This was when we had just moved to Pretoria, and I enjoyed it so much, man. The high school days, making provincial teams. I mean, that was at the height of Blue Bulls rugby. That was the height of Blue Bulls rugby. That was a golden era of rugby in general in Pretoria, and it was just such a privilege to be involved with the setup at Loftus, playing for the under 18 teams and everything, because you felt like a professional. Everything that we did at Loftus, the training sessions, we had psychology sessions, they would really prepare us well to go play in the provincial tournaments, man. And it was just so fucking awesome. Like, I really, really enjoyed those years, and it goes by so quickly. But anyway, I don't want to spend the whole podcast talking about those days, because honestly, if I do that, we're going to sit for about 2 hours. So anyway, initially I had never planned to play sport after high school. The plan was always, and this was something that we had discussed with the parents, was that sports was something we did while, in elementary or primary school up to high school. And then after that, we focus solely on our studies, But, in my senior year or matric year, again, depending on where you live and what you call your final year as a high scholar, I did so well at a provincial tournament, and I was offered a scholarship, to play rugby the following year and to do my studies. So it was, it was a double whammy. It was a double win for me and my folks because they were just happy about the fact that I'd gotten a scholarship to attend university and, carry on playing, the sport that I love. And, from there, man, things just took off. They didn't take off immediately, I was frustrated where I was, This was back in the day when there was still, a lot of racism within the game of rugby in South Africa. And this was at a time when I was down in Potchefstroom, and, it was just such a culture shock for me. But, I lived through that. But after 2 years, I made the conscious decision to return to Pretoria, finish off my studies over there. And once I finished my studies, things sort of opened up. That's when I also started getting opportunities of playing my rugby overseas. I was really fortunate that I was able to play rugby in Northern Ireland. I had an epic stint in Northern Ireland. I was able to play in the US. With rugby still developing in America, it was such a good time to be part of that development process. Now it's gone even further in terms of development, and they've got professional structures set up with the Major League Rugby. So rugby is in a healthy state in the US, and I just feel fortunate that I was around when the game was still picking up. 2012, when the game was still growing. I really enjoyed that time, and it was an epic experience. We managed to play in the USA National Sevens tournament in San Francisco. California is beautiful. So I got to experience all of that, man, and it's all through sport. And then after the US, I moved to Hong Kong. I played a bit in Hong Kong, and again, being in Asia for the first time, that really opened up my eyes. And what I enjoyed about Hong Kong was that was my first introduction into the world of, semi-pro sports. But it was the first time that I saw sports as a business, because that's how it's treated in Asia, man. You get so many companies that are just actively involved in the sporting entities, and you see all of this, through all the events you attend while representing your team. All the sponsorship banquets and, mingling and networking. Like it really taught me about the business side of sports. But again, I was having so much fun and, networking and meeting people that I didn't realize that I was learning about the business aspect of sports, So then again, fast forward more. After I left Hong Kong, I moved to France, where I wanted to, educate myself more. So I enrolled in a master's, and yeah, France is France, man. It's such a different place. The French have such a different approach to the game, and just the lifestyle. It's so lax. But yeah, France became a little bit frustrating for me because of just how slow things can move over there. But yeah, after I did my 2 years in France, I decided I wanted to head back to Asia again. But I didn't want to go back to Hong Kong because, the Hong Kong lifestyle, man, it's a fast lifestyle, and if you're not ready for it, it can be a lot. It can be a lot. So I wanted to come back to Asia, but I didn't want to go back to Hong Kong. So, I started doing my research, man. And that's when, I got an opening that I could come to Japan. And so about 4 years ago, I moved to Japan, and yeah, just really totally new culture, totally different to Chinese culture. But I embraced it, and 4 years later, I'm still in Japan, and I'm still loving it, and I'm still enjoying it. So in Japan, I played 2 seasons, and, I could feel that I was at the end, of my rugby career. And after I retired, and this, every athlete goes through this, that after you stop doing something that you have been doing for so long, you're in sort of a limbo about, okay, what to do next. If there's one thing I definitely knew that I did not want to become a fucking coach. this is no knock against coaches, man. I think, guys who are passionate about coaching, they do a phenomenal job. But, in my case, I sort of knew that I wasn't cut out for coaching because I'm just not patient enough, for the gig. And I just, I just felt it in my gut that it just isn't something that I wanted to do. So the next best thing was, what about becoming a sports agent? And, so I did my researched hard, and obviously my first go-to sport was to try and become a rugby agent. But when I saw the bureaucracies and the path I'd have to travel to become a rugby agent, it sort of turned me off, because, and especially now with the COVID situation, I would have never been able to travel back to South Africa and get my accreditation over there. It would have just been impossible. So another good thing about Japan is that, rugby is not the main sport here. So you get to meet other athletes of other sporting codes. So, one day I met like a basketball player and we became good friends, And the one time we were having coffee at Starbucks and I was just telling him basically what I understand about the business of sport. And he literally just turned around to me and he was like, dude, I'd love it if you actually became a basketball agent. I would sign with you. Light bulb moment, man. Bing! It goes off and I'm like, all right, this sounds interesting. At this point, mind you, I knew a bit about basketball because, I follow the sport. Ever since the days of Jordan, Allen Iverson, Kobe, LeBron. Like, I've always been big fans of the big sporting icons, from the basketball sphere. So it got me interested, man, and I started doing my research. Thing is, about me, if I become interested in something, I really lock in, So I spent a good number of months, reading up articles on Google, man, and just, trying to learn as much as I could about the business end of this because it was a little scary. But, I researched the website that I could join and where I was able to get the resources on how to become a basketball agent. And they were really helpful on that platform, man, because I reached out to the CEO of the federation, the basketball federation, and he got back to me and he told me the process I would have to go through to become an agent. And I was just keen, like I was all for it, And guess what happens? COVID-19 strikes, man. And once that happened, I kid you not, about a month before I was due to go for my agency test in Singapore, boom, everything is shut down. Tests are cancelled. And everything was called off. And I was in my feelings about that whole thing because I was like, literally a year's research and a year's grind gone to waste. And the most frustrating thing about this whole COVID-19 situation, man, is that nobody could tell you, when things would either be back to normal, so to speak, or when the tests would be back up again, or when licensing would happen again. So I was literally again back in the same place as how I felt when I just retired from playing rugby. It was just your mind is in such limbo, man, when you're like, okay, what's next? Obviously, I've got work that I do here in Japan for corporation and stuff like that, but it's like trying to find that escape, man, that, keeps you in the sporting biz. So that's what I was about to be missing. So I had to be creative. And I had to look for the next sport, to come into. And luckily, football happening to be licensing and stuff like that. So, I got in contact with them and, we had a conversation. I told them about my history. I sent them, my resume and everything. We set up the meeting and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's how I became a Japan Football Association accredited football intermediary or agent, however way you want to phrase it. So the journey, it's definitely been a humbling one. And now the next step, obviously, is, after you become accredited, you obviously got to start practicing. You got to start working. And, opportunities did come, for me to join companies. But, just something in my gut was like, don't do it, dude. Don't do it. And I had to bite the bullet. But, but before I bit the bullet and, refuse these companies, I had to know that I was foregoing, being able to have access to company credit cards, having all my flights paid for when I'm visiting players, in different cities here in Japan. I had to give all of that up, to go independent, Going independent, starting off as an agent, it's really not as sexy as, when you watch the series like Ballers and, Entourage, Entourage and all the other, shows that have you excited about becoming an agent. When you're starting up, it's really a humbling process. I'm still traveling that journey now, but, things are picking up. But it's really, it's a humbling process, man. You've got to foot the bill for everything, And Japan is one of those countries where, they don't offer credit line to foreigners. So every single thing that I've had to pay for, from getting my own office space, co-working space, for paying for traveling expenses, everything, man, is all covered by me. It's all coming out of my pocket. So if there's any agents out there that are, looking to get into the business, my advice to you is don't give up your day job just yet. You still need to pay your bills. You still need to keep the lights on. You still got to pay your office rent. You got to pay for stationery, all those nitty-gritty expenses, man, they all add up, trust me. So the last thing you want is to have anxiety about, where your next meal is going to come from, or, just having worries like that. Like, I wouldn't want you to burden yourself with that, especially if you're starting your agency in a foreign country. I think things would have been different if I'd started my agency back home in South Africa. I think definitely the stress level would have been lighter because, I'm home. There's a lot of people I can reach out to and everything. In Japan, yes, there are people who love me. I've built up a community of friends and everything. But at the same time, you want to maintain that state of independence, So pretty much, man, everything that I've had to pay for, from my licensing to office supplies, to buying that one pencil, that one diary and everything, it's all covered by me, boss, But the one thing I'll tell you is it's liberating. And I know that it's something that's going to pay off big in the long run. And, I just feel really fortunate and blessed that, I'm not struggling for clients, because I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a very good platform to use when prospecting and sourcing out for clients. Because a lot of my clients find me on LinkedIn, they contact me, they invite me, we have conversations, we organize online meetings, and then I make a decision on whether I want to take this client on or not. And so that's pretty much how it goes, man. I'm just, grateful that at least certain pieces of the puzzle, I don't have to scrape for. But it's really a humbling process. And now, the summer transfers have just passed, and now we're looking on to the winter transfers. So there's no rest in this job, man, but you gotta love it. I encourage you that if you want to get into the business of sport as a sports agent, you gotta love this grind, because a lot of the grind that you're gonna do in the beginning, you literally aren't gonna see any financial returns while you're starting out. But as soon as they come, trust me, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. But do your best to get into other things. Like, for example, one thing I told myself coming into this industry was that I want to document. I want to document the journey. I want to document everything. I don't want to wait until the end of my agency career before documenting everything that I've been through. So I'm sort of living in the moment and documenting everything. And I did that. I started off by, releasing like an ebook series where I'm basically talking about the journey, keeping it as authentic as possible, keeping it as real as possible, no lies. So that's what I encourage, wannabe agents or agents coming into the industry or the sports biz, is that, try diversify in your journey, see how else you can create income streams and enjoy the ride, man. Like, I'm really loving this, just the rush of prospecting, getting contact with these professional teams, making deals. It's all worth it. It's all worth it, and it really makes you feel like, yeah, I'm part of the industry. I'm part of the business, Another thing that I would encourage, man, don't come into the industry with a big ego or arrogance. This is an industry where you're building relationships. So you might want to check yourself and check your ego at the door, and not step on too many toes, man. Like I'm saying, don't let entourage and ballers fool you about, the high profanity. Yes, there's high profanity. I mean, this is sports, but just be good to people, form relationships, and you'll see they'll work out for you in the end. So that is pretty much our first episode. I wanted to just pretty much just give you a rundown of what the podcast is going to be about. We're going to divulge and we're going to talk about, just the business aspect of sports, man. We're mostly going to focus on soccer, football, rugby, and basketball. But we're going to touch on other sports as well, depending on their content. But I'm not going to pretend like I give a shit about cricket. I really don't. But if there's good content to talk about, we'll talk about it. I'm not going to pretend like I'm the biggest tennis fan, even though I've got a few friends that play tennis, but I'm not the biggest fan of the craft. But I do try to watch, when I can. So I'm not going to pretend to be, basically an expert in sports that I know little about. I'll try share, content and information that I know about them, but the three biggest ones that I pretty much follow on a daily basis and that I just pretty much live for are, soccer, basketball, and rugby. So we'll be talking a lot of content about that, just about the industry, as a whole, and the entire industry in each individual sport. So I'm really excited, and I'm really excited that I got started with this, and I'm really excited to bring you guys the content, because the one thing I'm going to tell you about sports biz from an agent's perspective, we don't only talk sports, we lived it, and we continue to live it on a daily basis. All right, so as the French say, allez-y, let's go. I'll see you all in episode number 2. All right, take care and cheers.